Joining us now to discuss is Clifford May, the founder of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Clifford, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to be with you.
Now, Clifford, over the last 2 weeks, millions of Israelis have taken shelter from rocket launches that include the Houthis, like today, and even several times from Gaza, which is something Israelis haven't experienced in months. Now, what does this say about Hamas's stockpile of weapons that clearly still exists?
Basically that. It clearly still exists. I imagine in the tunnels they were able to take various parts and put them together and assemble some kinds of missiles. They still have some weapons. It would tell me that it's very important that the Israelis hold on to the Philadelphia corridor, since I think most of us believe that has been the route through which additional weapons, munitions, supplies have been coming in. And I think that has to be blocked. They have weapons, and they need to run out of combatants. I think a lot of them are hiding in their tunnels, letting innocent civilians above act as human shields. And as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was arguing, that may finally be having an impact on Gazan civilians who are understanding that Hamas is causing them tremendous, tremendous suffering over a long period of time, and that Hamas is the problem.
Right. You mentioned, of course, Hamas fighters not being seen on the streets. You know, just a few weeks ago, we saw them actively parading hostages around inside of Gaza. Now, just this week, an elderly man was shot and killed, and an IDF soldier was seriously injured in a terror attack near the city of Yokneam here in Israel. Officials say the terrorist was an Israeli Arab from a nearby village in the north. Now, this is the third terror attack in the last 3 weeks to happen here in Israel. Why is there an uptick in these types of attacks?
Well, I mean, one point that I want to emphasize, and I wish more Americans understood this, is that Hamas fighters, so to speak, are happy to put their uniforms on during a ceasefire, and when they can humiliate Israeli hostages, which is, of course, a war crime, but they are committing war crimes even by holding the hostages, by torturing the hostages, by not letting the Red Cross come in. All of that, as soon as the ceasefire ends, because hostages are not being given up, they either take their uniforms off or hide in their tunnels. I wish more people at places like the UN and the NGOs would take note of that and realize what that says about Hamas. As far as terrorism, look, overall, within Israel, you know better than I do, 20% of your population is Arab and or Muslim. For the most part, relations are better than one might expect, especially at a time of multi-front war. But there are going to be some people that Hamas or Hezbollah or the Islamic Republic of Iran does manage to recruit. And so while fighting this seventh front war, the Israelis also have to worry about what's going on their own territory, as they always have.
Now, with renewed fighting in Gaza and military operations continuing to expand there, the former Mossad chief Tamir Pardo said today the government has opened, quote, the gates of hell on the Israeli hostages held by Hamas by returning to war last week. Tell us what your response to this is, and how can Israel achieve their objectives in this war by returning to fighting there?
Look, Israelis argue that Israelis argue among themselves always about policies and strategies. For myself, once it became clear that Hamas was not going to return any more hostages during a ceasefire, I think it became incumbent upon the Israelis to say, then we're going to put more military pressure on Hamas. The hostages have been mistreated, abused, tortured for the entire time they have been held. At this point, Hamas can kill them. Hamas can treat them worse. Or perhaps with the military pressure, some Hamas, whatever is left of the Hamas leadership, and it keeps getting lower and lower down, will say, okay, I'll trade the hostages for my life, for safe passage out to Algeria or Qatar or Turkey or some other country. My guess is that Prime Minister Netanyahu would welcome that, or at least to say, okay, in exchange for the hostages, you get your lives, we'll give you safe passage to another country. Mm-hmm. As an analyst, I have to say that doesn't sound like the worst possible choice, and the choice choices, and none of the choices are good here.
Just today, the mother of hostage Matan Zankauker released a video pleading in Arabic to Hamas leaders in Khan Yunis for proof of life of her son. Realistically, now that fighting has resumed, how can this hostage crisis be resolved?
I don't think this hostage crisis can be resolved myself in any other way except to continue to pressure Hamas, continue to fight Hamas, and leave open the possibility that if Hamas will release the hostages and put down their arms, Hamas leaders can get safe passage to a country like Turkey, Algeria, Qatar, or somewhere else. That's got to be the trade. I don't think simply not fighting Hamas, I think we kind of know this, means that Hamas will suddenly say, oh, well, let's give up the hostages, which they consider to be their insurance policy. I just don't see another way but that myself. But again, I know that Israel is a democratic society, and Israelis tend to have disagreements among themselves, as well they should.
Clifford, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.